What's going on, everyone? Don't forget to vote on Google Classroom if you want to do this whole genocide thing after we do the Holocaust. Please vote on that right now. Not too many votes right now, but as of right now, it seems like it's like 2-1. People would rather move on. So for every 2 votes to move on, we have 1 that wants to do another genocide. So that might change. There are only a handful of votes in. So make sure you vote, get your voice heard. It's on Google Classroom. It's one of the first posts. So today we're going to continue with that article for a little bit. Again, drill down a little deeper, try to make this make a little more sense without making it too confusing. And then what I would like to do is watch a Geography Now where he's going to talk about Burundi. And Burundi and Rwanda, we've talked, they're very close and yet pretty far away from each other. We're going to look at some travel advisories, like if you wanted to travel to Rwanda, maybe to see the mountain gorillas, which is a big thing on my list. I was telling a couple classes yesterday, it's $1,500 to, I think they call it track gorillas for the day. So, I mean, you get to hang out with the gorillas, which is pretty cool, but it's $1,500. Yeah, Block A, I know we talked about that. That might have been the only class. And then you could go to Uganda for like half the price, but Uganda is another country like you can't really travel to. So Rwanda seems like now in 2023, they're doing everything right, while most of the countries around them, the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Burundi, very dangerous to travel to. Uganda's no picnic either. So all right, but let's try to pick up where we left off with things just starting. Habyarimana. I need to remember how to pronounce that guy's name. So that guy, Habyarimana, well, I'll pause here. Does anybody know that guy? Maybe the most important name to know when you're talking about the Rwandan genocide. All right, so that guy is in power for like 20 years, from like the 70s until his plane goes down. We'll talk about that today in more detail. But he's pretty moderate. He's not an extremist. And at times, he's not a dictator. So he kind of has to listen to the people around him. But at times, he will come out and say, you know what? Let's get the Tutsis involved in the government. He's moderate. He wants to include everybody. But if you remember, his wife, and I don't know how to say her name exactly, but it starts with an A, his wife is an extremist. She's the opposite. She's like, it should be, you heard it a couple times, I think, Hutu power. So, you know, it sounds kind of like, if you know anything about the Nazis, sounds a little bit like that, if we can kind of draw a comparison to the next genocide that we're going to talk about. So this feeling of like, hey, we are superior. Because remember, I think the video we watched today, Geography Now, is going to do a really good job of talking about how the Tutsis were like the royalty. They didn't have to do as much manual labor, while the Hutus were more of like the serving class. They worked in the fields. They served the monarch kind of thing. And Rwanda and Burundi, remember, under Belgian rule, they were one country. And then he's even going to talk about it in Geography Now, how, I might have to sneeze, how, excuse me, how when the colonial powers pull out, it's like, it's a mess. So let's try to get up to that plane crash, because I want to talk, and it's not going to be too long, because I know this stuff is pretty difficult to read. I mean, it can be pretty boring to read. I don't know if, you know, it's written at a 9th grade level, but it can be a little bit boring and super confusing. So I have highlighted right here the RPF. Let's talk about them for a second. I know you have a definition. I know you've probably done a study guide on them, but the RPF, I don't know. Does anybody want to take this one? If not, I know this is kind of a hard one, but the RPF was made up of Tutsis. So Tutsis are not only found in Rwanda, they're found in Burundi, they're found in Uganda. And what happened was, some might have been living there already, but when the Tutsis left Rwanda, they kind of formed an army outside of the country, always wanting to take back over, like, hey, Rwanda's our home country. We need to get weapons. And then we'll get the Hutus out of power. That was always the idea. So that RPF, that's what they're doing. And that's kind of why English is so widely spoken in Rwanda now, is because so many Tutsis left, went to Uganda, former British colony where they speak English. And then after the RPF takes over in 94, more Tutsis settle there, English-speaking Tutsis. Okay. All right. So RPF is more or less a civil war at this time, or maybe you could say an invasion from another army outside of the country. Not a genocide yet. Both powers are kind of equal. But this is where it starts. Because that guy, Habyarimana, once the RPF comes in and starts attacking, what he is going to do is he's going to accuse Tutsi residents of being part of the RPF. Even if they were living there, they never left the country. Tutsis were somebody to be like feared or to be careful of. And in the US, this reminds me of the internment camps during World War II. I'll pause here. Does anybody know internment camps, World War II? Allergies. So after the bombing of Pearl Harbor by the Japanese, and there were several, I don't know, 1,000, maybe tens of thousands of Japanese Americans living on the West Coast. And the United States government was worried. Can we trust these people? Now, luckily, maybe a couple, but I don't think Japanese people were rounded up and murdered. No, definitely not. But they were all rounded up and put into internment camps, not concentration camps. There was no goal of killing people, but it was extremely unfortunate because everybody of Japanese descent or suspected of being Japanese, they were thought, could they be spies? And so they had to give up their homes. They had to give up their businesses. They had to give up their jobs. So an enormous loss of income. And when many of them got out of the internment camps, had to start all over, poverty. It was a horrible thing that happened, but it reminded me of that. So the RPF, largely, or mostly, probably all Tutsis, and then the people who were living in Rwanda, never left, were suspected of being maybe Tutsi sympathizers. Oh, you have a brother. Your father is in that. I don't know. We got to watch out for you. So there were actually some of the killings started then. So it created this whole this atmosphere of distrust. Not that things were great before, believe me, but even more reason to distrust your neighbor. But luckily, 1992, a ceasefire. We talked about that. So no fighting there. This could be Habyarimana's downfall right here. So in August of 1993, he signed an agreement that said, hey, we have this ceasefire. Let's allow you into the government. Okay, we should have a government run by both Hutus and Tutsis. He's a moderate. His wife even is an extremist, and she hates this idea. And so what happens in 92, Hutu extremists, they don't like this. And they are going to take some kind of action to make sure that that doesn't happen. So April 6th, this is where the genocide begins. April 6th, a plane carrying the president was shot down in Kigali. No survivors. We don't know who did it. We don't know who the culprits were. Some have blamed Hutu extremists, while others blamed the RPF. To me, doesn't make sense that the RPF would shoot down his plane. Anybody have any ideas why? Okay. So hopefully somebody said, well, he was already trying to get the RPF into the government. They were getting what they wanted. So it doesn't make sense that the Tutsis would shoot down the plane. It makes more sense that Hutu extremists that didn't want to allow Tutsis in the government by any reason would shoot his plane down so they could get what they wanted. And yesterday, we talked about how in the 70s in Burundi, the country we're going to talk about in just a second, there was a genocide. 200,000 Hutus were killed. Excuse me. Even though the Tutsis were still, you'll see in today's video, about 15% of the population, they controlled the government. The Hutus didn't have access to weapons. They weren't in the military largely. So you had a genocide where the opposite happened and Hutus were killed. That's just the next country over. So Hutus are going to be on guard, and all heck is going to break loose in 94, and that's when the genocide starts. Now let's talk about today. If you want to travel to Rwanda, like I do, I would love to go to Kigali. And then I've researched it a little bit. It's a 3-hour ride to go see the gorillas. It's $1,500, probably something I will never do. But if I make a YouTube video out of it, I could get it down to like 1,000 because you can write it off where you don't have to pay taxes on that money. So it's like 30% off. Anyways, I could make it work, possibly. Maybe not next year, but the year after. I don't know. I think it would be a cool video. Teaching English while you're walking with a gorilla. As long as they don't, what a class, I think it was class E, we talked about how maybe not, I mean, gorillas, if they want to, they crush you. But some of the smaller primates are the ones you have to worry about even more. But there's a lot. I watched the whole spiel you get before you go walking with gorillas. And one of the main things was like just no sudden movements, just like these things could just eat you for dinner. Chill, okay? No sudden movements. So I think it would be kind of cool. So let's say you want to, I can pull it up. Let's say you want to go to Rwanda. All right. There are all these just kind of like travel advisories, things like that. So if you look like Rwanda, it's in the blue zone. You know, exercise normal precautions. So, you know, there's crime, I'm sure. But if you remember from the video we watched a couple of days ago, way less crime in Rwanda than there is in even the United States. And their economy is growing faster than ours. So Rwanda, for whatever reason, well, we went over all the videos where, you know, remember the cows and picking up the trash and making sure education is mandatory until age 16. So Rwanda has like very, very few, like just exercise normal caution. Yeah, you could get robbed. You get robbed anywhere, right? Just don't go flashing money around. You should be all right. Now, let's take a look at Burundi over here. This is in the 3. If you look there, make it a little bigger. That's in the, you know, maybe you don't want to travel here. Reconsider travel due to crime, health, political violence. So there is still tribal, the Hutus and the Tutsis, there is still animosity between the two of them. They're still not exactly perfect. Especially in some parts of the country, there is armed violence. So there's a national park that probably would be amazing to go see, but yeah, carjacking, home invasions, grenade attacks. Yeah, I'm okay. So I might go to Rwanda in the next few years. I will definitely not be going to Burundi anytime soon. Uganda, from what I really quickly looked at, is that there's also mountain gorillas there. A little bit more politically unstable than Rwanda. So I think if you want to travel to like Central Africa, Rwanda is the ticket. Go to Kigali, and you could stay there like really cheaply. I was looking at it, like a really nice place, $30 a night, something like that. So, all right, that's it for today. We'll get into a little Burundi, see how it's different from Rwanda today, see how the history is very similar to Rwanda, and then we'll get into a little Frank and Beans, maybe a little time to working class. Adios.